Hirabayashi-san, for this chat, I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about your history with Capcom and, leading up to Capcom and what you've been doing here, and just kind of talk about you a little bit.
So I actually started Capcom back in 2001. I started as a designer, and in fact the first game I was assigned to was Resident Evil on GameCube.
Perfect.
Yeah, when I first saw screens and mock-ups of the game in progress, I was just floored. I thought, man, this is a place where pros work for sure. I don't know that other companies can get this kind of graphical performance out of this machine. It turns out it wasn't even just other companies, other teams internally where we were. I think that was really the only group of people ever able to pull out something like that.
Well, it's crazy to think at that time too that it jumped from the PlayStation to the GameCube. That was one era.
Yeah, and you're right, it did. It really felt like more than a one generational jump, and it was such a big difference. So having worked on that initial title, I was a modeler, a character modeler. When I said designer specifically, that's what I was doing. And in fact, those of you who got to know a little too well the Forest Spire zombie in Remake, that was me. I created that model. And then after that game, I moved on to the Resident Evil Zero team, and in that instance, it was not in-game character models I was working on, but the cutscenes.
Okay.
Actually.
So before we go into Resident Evil 0 and beyond, do you remember the first Resident Evil game you played? Was it Resident Evil 1?
No, 2.
2. Where were you at in your life, like when you played Resident Evil 2 for the first time? Do you have like memories of playing that for the first time?
Yes, I was in college when I first encountered RE2, and I remember thinking, a scary video game, come on, this can't be scary, and I turned off my lights and I decided to play with the lights off. Less than a half hour later, I had the lights back on, and I realized that yes, indeed, games could be scary.
Do you remember talking with friends a lot about it, or how did Resident Evil 2 affect you as a fan of games?
It's funny, at the time, it didn't have a huge effect on me. It was a game that people were talking about. They were talking about the scary series called Resident Evil. I gave it a shot. It was scary. It was fun. Quite enjoyed it. Moved on. It wasn't until much later, now at this point in my career, when I started working on the original Resident Evil GameCube remake, started looking back and thinking, what was it like when I first got to experience this title? How can I replicate this sort of feeling for other users? I was able to kind of take myself out of the shoes of a creator and put myself in the shoes of a user, because it hadn't been all that long before when I had experienced it for the first time myself.
What were you doing before you started at Capcom?
So actually, interestingly enough, I studied economics in college, and I had not intended to work in games or be a designer. Design was something I enjoyed doing kind of as a hobby. Gradually realized, hey, I'd really like to do this for a living. So once I was out of school, went back in school to a specialty school for game design, and then Capcom was actually my first gig once I was out of that school.
So it was straight from studying economics to helping create character models in the Resident Evil remake?
Yeah, I'll put it to you this way. I wasn't studying economics all that seriously, to be honest. I was not a serious student. I spent more time kind of on my hobbies, which is when I realized it would make a lot more sense to do that for a living, I think.
What are your memories of when you started working on the remake and working with Shinji Mikami?
Yeah, over a decade later, the one thing that really sticks with me, it was an important lesson I learned in those days, and I think I still struggle to apply this lesson in game making, is that when it comes to horror specifically, it's a lot less about logic and a lot more about feeling. It's less thinking with your head and more with your heart. And say you have some kind of computer algorithm that can put together a great action game purely using logic and using kind of mind functionality. Could be a great game, but it's not going to scare you. I'll tell you that for sure. That really has to come from the heart and has to come from a different place. It was a really important lesson. It's something I think about a lot. I don't know that I'm always applying it properly. It's also something that's really difficult to put into words. It might be coming off as being kind of oversimplified, but I think of it as a pretty complex issue.
Okay. Oh, I think I got it. Mikami always wear a baseball hat? Is he always? Not always? Okay, all right.
He kind of changed. He had the kind of an image change partway through his whole career then.
Okay.
Yeah. In those days, he wore a lot of sunglasses.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, it was sunglasses back then. That's the Mikami that I know.
Okay. Pretty cool look overall. Okay.
Don't tell him I said that.
Okay, don't worry about it. Yeah.
He scares me. In a good way.
Well, because he goes from the heart.
He was my old boss.
Yeah. So when you were working on the remake, do you remember studying and playing the 1996 original Resident Evil a lot? And were you doing a lot of comparison and playing?
In those days, sure. But I think really the important thing to remember about the way we were treating the GameCube remake, even in those days, is that it was sort of intended to subsume the original and kind of take its place. It was going to be the true and ultimate vision of the original director. So this is something that he was pretty vocal about in those days, and it's something that I have taken to heart heart myself. And when it comes even to this remastered version that we're working on now, it's it's taking the masterpiece version on GameCube and remaking that, and it doesn't really have its eye any further in the past than that. Of course, there have been some fixes in the grenade launcher issue.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay.
Really wondered if we should fix that or not at the end of the day. It's kind of sad. I feel bad because users know how to do that, and a lot of them are going to try that trick. They're going to be pretty disappointed that it's not in there. And I almost wanted to include it just as kind of fan service for those guys. But we really want to make this a fair game.
Right.
We don't want to have something so overpowering as an unlimited rocket launcher in there, grenade launcher.
So you started working with cinematics on Resident Evil 0, and was that your focus moving on from 0 and then 4 and 5 and 6 as well?
Yeah, so moving on to RE4, that was my first kind of stab at leading the cinematic team. That was a big jump for me, and then continued to kind of lead that and supervise on 5 as well.
Were the QuickTime event scenes, was that a big undertaking for you personally, since they're kind of a blending of, cinematics and gameplay?
It's funny you should mention that. That was actually, I'm not going to take full credit. I didn't, create these all myself. But the idea of putting the QTs into RE4 is something that originated with me. And what we were trying to solve for, I think, was the idea when you have cutscenes, people tend to put the controller down for a few seconds. So you have this weird sort of rhythm where they're playing the game and they're not playing the game, and they're playing the game and they're not playing the game. And I thought it'd be great if we could get some reason in there for people to keep the controller in their hand, to be at the ready, to participate in some way with the cutscenes. So that's how that idea, as far as 4 is concerned, was born.
What was it like working on Resident Evil 4 and being a part of that development team when you started to see the reception of the game and realize how much of a game changer it was, not only for the series, but also just for third-person, shooters in general?
It's funny, I remember the moment, I think, when a lot of us noticed that this was going to be something really special. Mikami-san was talking early on a lot about, hey, this is going to be a 3D kind of third-person affair. Half the team thought he was nuts. They thought, well, this isn't RE, what is this guy doing? But, he knows best, so if that's what he wants, we'll make that. And we started making it. Not all of us were terribly confident. Eventually, a build comes around, and we would get a chance to kind of get some hands-on play with it and see how it really feels. And I think all of us walked away from that thing, holy crap, there's definitely something special here. I mean, it feels like RE, but it feels new. It really suits this world. You saw a sea change within the team then. People became more confident, more motivated, I think.
And then what was it like when it came out and when you learned that the world loved Resident Evil 4 and that you had a part in that?
Yeah, my feelings on that were actually pretty simple, and they could be summed up with, wow, Mr. Mikami is incredible. I mean, to have taken that game and changed it up that much, and to have managed the team well enough to get everyone on board with an idea that wasn't initially popular, I just can't understate what a big deal that was. I mean, the credit for that game, as good as it is, really does belong with him.
And then for the really, really important question, what was your favorite pistol in Resident Evil 4?
VP70. He's trying to remember the name of it. I can't recall either.
Was it the one that you unlocked, the secret one?
Yeah, like the secret unlock
like, yeah. In the Resident Evil or the PlayStation 2 version.
PlayStation 2.
Okay.
Can't actually remember correctly. He doesn't remember how he got it or what version it was in, but he knows he liked playing it. I feel like I should say Samurai Edge, but because you identified it as an important question, perhaps sarcastically, I thought it was worth giving it some thought on my side and taking it serious. So didn't want to give the easy answer.
Why not the Red 9? How is the Red 9 not the best gun? It's so strong. And it looks like a Star Wars blaster. And it has the thing that you can... Yeah. Why is that not the best one?
So we talk about what's best and what's not best, and this really gets rather subjective. But the Red 9 is pretty awesome. You do a very good point.
All right. I think we can agree on that then. Okay, good. Well, from majoring in economics all the way to helping remaster the first game you ever worked on, it seems like you've had a really successful career. So I want to say congratulations on that, and thanks for talking with me about it.
Well, thank you. I mean, it is definitely it's something else to be able to bring one of the first game that I worked on back to people in a new form. It really is a special kind of feeling.
Better than being an economist, I think.
そうですね。やめてよかったでしょう。
A little bit, yeah.